At precisely 10:17 a.m. on a Tuesday, Otis Carter set aside his mop and entered Sterling Corp's executive boardroom unannounced. Laughter erupted as the all-white leadership team spotted the 68-year-old black janitor in their sacred space. "Lost. Your way, old man?" Ryan Sterling sneered, his Harvard MBA and family name a shield for his embezzlement schemes. "Not at all," Otis replied, sliding a document across the table. The laughter died as they read it, official proof that this invisible man they'd degraded for decades was actually the majority shareholder. While they'd seen only a janitor, Otis had been watching, documenting, and waiting for this perfect moment. His engineering degree from Howard had gathered dust, but his ownership papers hadn't. Now, as 400 employees faced layoffs, Otis Carter would finally reclaim his company from those who never bothered to see the man behind the mop. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The hallways of Sterling Corp gleamed under the fluorescent lights as Otis Carter pushed his cleaning cart through the empty corridors at 5:30 a.m. His weathered hands gripped the handle with practiced ease, the calluses telling stories of decades of hard work. At 68, his movements were slower than they once were, but no less precise. The company wouldn't officially come to life for another 2 hours, but Otis preferred the quiet of dawn. It gave him time to think, to observe, to remember. He paused outside the executive suites, fishing out his ring of keys. The polished brass nameplate on the nearest door read, "Ryan Sterling, CEO." Otis allowed himself a slight smile as he unlocked the door and slipped inside. The office was immaculate, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Otis emptied the trash can, careful not to disturb the meticulously arranged papers on the mahogany desk. As he worked, his eyes drifted to a framed photograph on the wall, a much younger Ryan standing beside his father, Thomas Sterling. Thomas had his arm around Ryan's shoulder, both men beaming with pride at the ribbon-cutting ceremony of Sterling Corp's first headquarters. What the photograph didn't show was the third person who had been standing just out of frame that day. Otis dusted the frame with particular care, his reflection ghosting over the glass surface. He remembered that day well, the day Thomas had promised him the world. The day before everything changed. The sound of approaching footsteps pulled Otis from his reverie. He quickly gathered his supplies and headed for the door, nearly colliding with Patricia Wilson, the company's HR director who was arriving unusually early. "Oh!" Patricia startled, her hand flying to her chest. When she registered who stood before her, her surprise morphed into dismissive recognition. "It's just you, Otis." "Morning, Ms. Wilson," Otis replied, his voice gentle but dignified. "Sorry to startle you." Patricia barely acknowledged the apology, her attention already fixed on her phone. "While you're here, the executive bathroom needs attention. Someone complained about water spots on the mirrors yesterday." She wrinkled her nose slightly. "And make sure you use the proper cleaning supplies this time. The smell was off last week." Otis nodded, swallowing the response that rose to his throat. "Yes, ma'am." "Good," Patricia said, already walking past him into her office. She paused at the doorway. "And Otis, the cleaning closet on the third floor still smells like you've been eating your lunch in there. The executives have commented on it. Find somewhere else, please." The door closed behind her, and Otis stood alone in the hallway, his expression unchanged, save for a slight tightening around his eyes. The third-floor closet was indeed where he took his lunch breaks, the only space in the building where he could sit in private for 30 minutes. The building had a cafeteria, of course, but the last time Otis had tried to eat there, Ryan Sterling himself had made a comment about keeping the help separate from the talent. Otis pushed his cart toward the executive bathroom, his shoulders straight despite the weight they carried. 20 minutes later, he was polishing the last mirror when the bathroom door swung open, and two young executives walked in, deep in conversation. "I'm telling you, Brad, the old man has lost his touch," the taller of the two was saying. "Last quarter's numbers were abysmal, and now he's talking about cutting another 15% of the workforce." "Lower-level employees only, I assume," Brad replied, straightening his tie in the mirror Otis had just cleaned, seemingly oblivious to the janitor's presence. Naturally. Can't cut the decision-makers, the first man laughed. He finally noticed Otis and lowered his voice slightly, though not enough. Speaking of which, how old do you think this one is? Shouldn't there be an age limit on pushing a mop? Brad snickered, glancing at Otis's reflection. Maybe he can't afford to retire, or maybe he just loves the smell of bleach and cleaning up after his betters. He raised his voice. Isn't that right, old-timer? Otis kept his eyes down, focusing on wringing out his cloth in the sink. Bathroom's all clean, gentlemen, he said quietly, gathering his supplies. Thank God for small mercies, the first executive muttered. At least they still know how to follow orders. As Otis moved toward the door, Brad stepped slightly into his path, forcing Otis to sidestep around him. Hey, while you're at it, someone spilled coffee in the conference room. Be a good boy and take care of that, would you? The condescension in the young man's voice was unmistakable, the boy sliding from his lips with practiced ease despite Otis being old enough to be his grandfather. Yes, sir, Otis replied, his voice steady even as something hardened in his chest. Right away. Throughout the morning, similar interactions played out across the building. A female executive held her nose dramatically as he passed, whispering loudly to her colleague about that smell. Two managers abruptly stopped their conversation when Otis entered their office to vacuum, watching him with suspicious eyes as if he might steal something, if not closely monitored. An intern nearly knocked over Otis's cart, then had the audacity to snap, "Watch where you put that thing," before continuing down the hall. Each slight was small on its own, a drop in a lifetime's ocean of indignities, but together, they formed the daily current against which Otis had swum for decades. By lunchtime, Otis retreated to his small sanctuary, the third-floor cleaning closet that Patricia had complained about. He pulled a small folding stool from behind the shelves of supplies and sat down heavily, his knees creaking in protest. From a worn leather lunch bag, he extracted a simple sandwich and a thermos of coffee. As he ate in the dim light of the closet, surrounded by the smell of industrial cleaners, his mind drifted back to a different time. He'd been young then, barely 30, working as a janitor for a much smaller company, the fledgling startup that Thomas Sterling had built from nothing. Thomas had been different from his son. He'd known Otis's name, asked about his family, treated him like a human being. There had been that night, the night the company nearly collapsed. Otis had been working late, emptying trash cans while Thomas sat alone in his office, head in his hands, surrounded by bills and final notices. Otis had brought him a cup of coffee, and somehow they'd started talking. Otis had mentioned the savings he'd scraped together over the years, planning to open his own small business someday. You know what, Otis? Thomas had said, eyes suddenly alight with an idea. I'd rather have one honest partner than 10 wealthy sharks. The memory dissolved as the closet door suddenly opened, flooding the small space with harsh fluorescent light. Ryan Sterling stood in the doorway, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the utilitarian setting. So this is where you hide, Ryan said, his nose wrinkling at the smell. Did Patricia not speak to you about this? We've had complaints. Otis quickly stood tucking away the remains of his meal. Sorry, Mr. Sterling, I was just finishing. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he took in the small stool, the lunch bag. Is this some kind of living arrangement I should know about? Because I'm pretty sure that would violate about a dozen health codes. No, sir, Otis replied, feeling a flush of embarrassment despite himself. Just my lunch break. Well, take it elsewhere, Ryan said dismissively. Preferably outside the building. This isn't a homeless shelter. His eyes flicked over Otis's worn uniform, though I can see how you might be confused about that. Before Otis could respond, Ryan's attention shifted to his phone, which had begun to ring. I need to take this. Make sure this closet is emptied of your personal effects by the end of the day. He walked away without waiting for a response, already engaged in his call. Otis stood in the closet doorway for a long moment, a familiar anger burning low in his chest. Slowly, deliberately, he packed away his lunch and folded the stool, placing it in his cart. But instead of continuing his rounds, He wheeled the cart to the employee locker room in the basement. The room was deserted at this hour. Otis approached. His locker, an old dented metal box in the far corner. He spun the combination lock with practiced fingers and opened the door. Inside, hanging neatly, was a spare uniform. Below it sat a battered leather briefcase that looked out of place. Among the humble surroundings, Otis carefully removed the briefcase and placed it on the nearby bench. The brass latches had long since lost their shine, but they opened smoothly at his touch. Inside lay a collection of documents protected by plastic sleeves, share certificates, contracts, letters, all meticulously preserved over decades. His fingers traced over one document in particular, a share certificate made out in his name, representing 51% ownership of Sterling Corporation, signed by Thomas Sterling himself. Next to it lay a handwritten letter, the paper yellowed with age but the words still clear. Otis, my friend. Without your belief in me and your investment, there would be no Sterling Corp. I know you want to remain in the background for now, and I'll respect that wish, but never forget, this company is as much yours as it is mine. When the time comes, these shares will speak for you. The time had never seemed right to reveal the truth. First, it was out of respect for Thomas and his vision. Then, after Thomas's unexpected death 15 years ago, it was the shock of watching Ryan take control and systematically dismantle his father's legacy. By the time Otis realized what was happening, Ryan had established himself so thoroughly that challenging him seemed impossible. But today, something had shifted. Perhaps it was the accumulation of small indignities. Perhaps it was overhearing the executives discussing another round of layoffs that would devastate the lower-level employees who had given years to the company. Or perhaps it was simply that, at 68, Otis had finally run out of reasons to wait. He carefully returned the documents to the briefcase, closed it, and placed it back in his locker. Not today, but soon. The reckoning that had been decades in the making was finally approaching. As Otis resumed his afternoon cleaning duties, he paused outside the main conference room where he could hear raised voices discussing the company's future. His company's future. His expression remained impassive, but his eyes held a determination that had been dormant for too long. The time for waiting was over. 3 days later, Sterling Corp was abuzz with tension as key personnel hurried toward the main conference room. An emergency board meeting had been called. The email marked urgent landing in executive inboxes just that morning. The subject line, Strategic Restructuring and Asset Management, was corporate speak for what everyone feared. Massive layoffs and selling off company divisions. Otis stood quietly in the corridor outside the conference room, wiping down the glass display case that housed the company's awards and accolades. Through the reflection, he watched board members file in, men and women in expensive suits, their faces set in expressions of grave importance. None of them so much as glanced his way. Ryan Sterling was the last to arrive, flanked by his CFO, Walter Price, and his loyal right-hand man, Logan Matthews. Ryan's stride was confident, almost arrogant, as he swept past Otis without acknowledgement. "Is everyone here?" Ryan's voice carried through the still-open door. "Close that, will you?" he directed at his assistant, pointing to the door. "We don't need the maintenance staff eavesdropping on company business." The door closed with a soft click, but not before Otis caught the dismissive wave of Ryan's hand in his direction. Otis continued polishing the display case, his movements deliberate as he positioned himself near the air vent, a spot he knew from experience carried sound from the conference room into the hallway. Inside, Ryan stood at the head of the long, mahogany table, surveying the gathered board members with the practiced confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Ryan began, his voice carrying clearly through the vent. "As you know, our last quarter was challenging. Our profit margins have shrunk to unacceptable levels, and shareholders are demanding action." Walter Price, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, distributed folders to everyone present. "The numbers don't lie," he said, his voice thin and reedy. "We're looking at a 15% drop in revenue compared to last year's projections. Which is why," Ryan continued, "I've assembled a comprehensive restructuring plan. He tapped his folder for emphasis. Page 3 outlines the first phase, a strategic workforce reduction of 20% across all departments. A murmur of concern rippled through the room. 20%? Questioned Martha Donovan, one of the longest-serving board members. That's nearly 400 employees, Ryan. 387, to be precise, Walter interjected. Primarily from lower and mid-level positions where redundancies can be eliminated without impacting core operations. Outside, Otis's hand stilled on the glass. 387 people, people with families, mortgages, dreams, people who had given years, sometimes decades, to Sterling Corp. His company. Back inside, Ryan was already moving on. Phase 2 involves liquidating underperforming assets. The Research and Development Division hasn't produced a marketable innovation in 18 months. We'll retain a skeleton crew for appearance's sake, but essentially we're shutting it down. But R&D was your father's pride and joy, Martha protested. Thomas believed innovation was the heart of Sterling Corp. Ryan's laugh was short and devoid of humor. My father also believed in paying the janitor more than market rate because he seemed like a good soul. Sentimentality doesn't keep shareholders happy, Martha. Laughter rippled around the table at Ryan's comment. Logan Matthews leaned forward, his expression serious despite the laughter. We've also identified some irregular accounting practices that need addressing. Walter has been working with me to clean things up. Walter shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Yes, well, there have been some creative bookkeeping measures implemented over the years. Nothing illegal, of course, he added hastily, but perhaps not entirely transparent to shareholders. The point is, Ryan cut in, these changes need to happen immediately. The first round of terminations begins next week, followed by the asset liquidation. I've already spoken with our PR team about managing the optics. From his position by the air vent, Otis could hear every word. His hands, which had maintained their steady rhythm on the display glass, finally stilled completely. This wasn't just a cost-cutting measure. This was the systematic dismantling of everything Thomas Sterling had built. Everything Otis had helped build. Inside the conference room, the discussion continued, with board members raising concerns only to have Ryan smoothly dismiss them. The conversation shifted to logistics. Who would handle the terminations? How? Severance would be structured. Which assets would be sold first? The cleaning staff can be reduced by half, Ryan was saying. We'll contract with an outside service for the heavy work. Cheaper, and we won't have to worry about benefits. Speaking of which, Walter interjected, there's that old janitor, Carter, I think. He's well past retirement age but still on full benefits. That alone could save us. Daddy's old charity case, Ryan interrupted with a dismissive wave. I've been meaning to phase him out for years. Consider it done. More laughter followed, punctuated by a comment from Logan. Maybe we should keep him around. He doesn't miss much. Might be good to have eyes and ears on the ground floor. What? The old black janitor, someone else chimed in. I doubt he understands half of what he overhears. Probably just happy to have a job at his age. The casual cruelty of the remark hung in the air for a moment before the conversation moved on. Outside, Otis felt a familiar weight settle in his chest, the weight of being seen but not truly seen, heard but not listened to, present but somehow invisible. A younger employee, Jake Wilson from the accounting department, approached the conference room, files in hand. He slowed as he noticed Otis standing by the display case. They've been in there a while, Jake commented, nodding toward the closed door. Word is they're planning major cuts. Otis nodded, carefully folding his polishing cloth. Seems that way. Jake hesitated, then lowered his voice. I've seen some strange numbers coming across my desk lately. Transfers to accounts I can't trace. Invoices for services we never received. He shook his head. Something's not right. But when I tried to bring it up with my supervisor, he shut me down hard. Before Otis could respond, the conference room door opened, and Logan Matthews stepped out. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Jake talking to Otis. Wilson. Logan's voice was sharp. Don't you have work to do? Yes, sir, Jake replied quickly. I was just bringing these reports for the meeting. Give them here, Logan commanded, extending his hand. As Jake passed over the files, Logan added, "And in the future, remember that fraternizing with the maintenance staff during work hours is discouraged. We pay you to crunch numbers, not make friends." Jake flushed with embarrassment but held his ground. Mr. Carter was just helping me with a spill near the display case. Logan's gaze swept over both men, clearly disbelieving but unwilling to prolong the interaction. "Fine, get back to your desk." He turned to Otis. "And you, the executive restrooms need attention. Someone was sick in there earlier." "Right away, sir," Otis replied, his voice betraying none of the anger that flashed in his eyes. As Logan returned to the conference room with Jake's files, the young accountant lingered just long enough to whisper, "They don't even know your first name, do they? Just the janitor or the old black guy." "It's not right." Otis gave Jake a small, appreciative nod before gathering his cleaning supplies. "Some people only see what they expect to see, Mr. Wilson." Throughout the rest of the afternoon, Otis went about his duties with his usual quiet efficiency. But his mind was elsewhere. He found himself pausing outside the records room on the 4th floor, a room he rarely had cause to enter. After a moment's hesitation, he used his master key to slip inside. The records room was dimly lit and filled with filing cabinets containing documents too sensitive or too old to be fully digitized. Otis moved carefully between the rows, scanning the labels until he found what he was looking for. Executive Compensation and Benefits, 2010-2020. He didn't have much time. Drawing on decades of knowledge about the building's security routines, he quickly located and pulled several folders, laying them open on a small side table. His eyes scanned the pages rapidly, looking for confirmation of his suspicions. There it was. Evidence of systematic financial manipulation. Executive bonuses that far exceeded approved amounts. Funds diverted from employee pension accounts. Falsified board minutes authorizing actions that had never been properly voted on. The door to the records room suddenly opened, and Otis froze. But it was only the night security guard making his rounds. "Oh, Mr. Carter," the guard said, surprised. "Didn't expect anyone to be in here this late." "Just doing some deep cleaning, Jim," Otis replied smoothly, casually standing to block the guard's view of the open folders. "Haven't gotten to this room in a while." The guard nodded, uninterested. "Well, don't work too late. Building's pretty much empty now." After the guard left, Otis carefully photographed several key documents with his old flip phone before returning everything exactly as he had found it. As he exited the records room, his mind was made up. The briefcase in his locker contained his nuclear option, but these new documents provided the context that would make his case irrefutable. The next morning, Otis arrived at Sterling Corp earlier than usual. He headed straight to his locker and retrieved the leather briefcase, its weight both familiar and momentous in his hands. Today was the day decades in the making. He changed from his janitor's uniform into the only suit he owned, purchased years ago for his daughter's wedding. It was slightly outdated and a bit loose on his frame, but it was clean and dignified. He combed his gray hair neatly and straightened his tie, looking at his reflection in the small mirror inside his locker door. For a moment, he barely recognized himself, not because of the suit, but because of the fire in his eyes, a determination that had been banked for too long. The face that looked back at him wasn't that of a passive janitor, but of an owner about to reclaim what was rightfully. At precisely 10 a.m., Otis knew the board would reconvene to finalize the details of their strategic restructuring. He made his way to the conference room floor, briefcase in hand, his heart pounding but his resolve unwavering. Outside the conference room, Ryan's assistant looked up in surprise as Otis approached, clearly not recognizing him at first without his uniform. "Sir, can I help you?" she asked, her confusion evident. "The board is in a private meeting right now." "I know," Otis replied simply. "They're expecting me." Before she could protest, Otis stepped past her and opened the conference room door. The conversation inside abruptly halted as all heads turned toward the interruption. Ryan Sterling, mid-sentence, stared in confusion. "What the—" Recognition dawned on his face, followed quickly by annoyance. "Carter, What are you doing, and why are you dressed like that? The room erupted in snickers and confused murmurs. Is that the janitor? Someone whispered loudly. What's he wearing? Is that suit from the 90s? Another board member remarked, prompting more laughter. Logan Matthews rose from his seat, moving toward Otis with a threatening posture. This is a closed meeting. You need to leave immediately. Otis stood his ground, his dignity intact despite the mockery. I'm afraid I can't do that, Mr. Matthews. You see, I have something important to contribute to this discussion about the future of Sterling Corporation. Ryan's face contorted with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. You? Contribute? He laughed, looking around the table to ensure others joined in. Look, Carter, I don't know what you think you overheard, but this is a board meeting, not a janitorial review. If you're worried about your job, take it up with HR after we're done here. The laughter grew louder, more confident. One executive mimicked pushing a mop, while another made a crude joke about Otis being lost on his way to the custodial closet. Is this some kind of protest? Walter Price asked nervously, because security can be here in 30 seconds. Through it all, Otis remained calm, even as the color of his skin became the subject of more than one whispered joke at the table. He placed his briefcase on the conference table with deliberate precision. Gentlemen, ladies, Otis said, his voice quiet but firm, cutting through the laughter. I'm not here as a janitor today. I'm here as the majority shareholder of Sterling Corporation. The laughter died abruptly, replaced by confused silence. Ryan recovered first, his face reddening with anger. That's absurd. This little stunt will cost you your job. Logan, call security. Before you do that, Otis replied, opening his briefcase to reveal the neatly organized documents within, I suggest you take a look at these. He removed the share certificate, the original, not a copy, and placed it in the center of the table for all to see. The Sterling Corp logo at the top was an earlier version, and Thomas Sterling's signature at the bottom was unmistakable. What is this supposed to be? Ryan demanded, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. This, Otis said calmly, is the certificate for 51% ownership of Sterling Corporation, issued to me by your father 35 years ago. I've been content to remain silent all these years out of respect for Thomas and his vision. But after what I heard yesterday, after seeing how far this company has strayed from its founding principles, that silence ends today. The room had fallen completely still, every eye fixed on the document before them and the quiet, dignified man who had brought their world to a sudden, unexpected halt. The boardroom had fallen silent, all eyes fixed on the weathered document in the center of the conference table, a share certificate bearing Sterling Corp's logo and Thomas Sterling's unmistakable signature. Ryan Sterling stared at it like it was a snake that had appeared among his carefully arranged papers. This is ridiculous, Ryan finally said, his voice tight with anger. You can't seriously expect us to believe that my father secretly gave majority ownership of his company to the janitor. The way he emphasized janitor made it clear what he really wanted to say. Several executives shifted uncomfortably, darting glances between Ryan and Otis, who remained standing calmly at the end of the table. Not secretly, Mr. Sterling, Otis replied evenly. The transaction was properly registered with the SEC. The documentation has been maintained in trust all these years. He placed several more papers beside the share certificate. Here are the original transfer documents, the trust agreement, and the registration records. Martha Donovan, the longest-serving board member, hesitantly reached for the nearest document. This appears authentic, she said, her voice carrying a note of wonder. But why? Why would Thomas do this? And why wait 35 years to mention it? Logan Matthews added accusingly. Conveniently after Thomas is dead and can't confirm or deny any of this. Otis removed a faded photograph from his briefcase and placed it on the table. It showed 3 men at Sterling Corp's first ribbon-cutting ceremony, Thomas Sterling in the middle, flanked by a younger Ryan and a younger Otis. It was the same image that hung in Ryan's office, except that version had been cropped to remove Otis from the frame. I met Thomas Sterling in 1987, Otis explained. I was working nights at Wilson's machine shop where Thomas came to prototype his first product designs. I had a degree in mechanical engineering from Howard University, but in those days, companies weren't exactly lining up to hire black engineers. The implication hung in the air. Thomas and I got to talking about his ideas. I made some suggestions that helped solve a design flaw he'd been struggling with. Ryan's face contorted with disbelief, watching Otis speak with knowledge no ordinary janitor should possess. Thomas had been rejected by every bank in the city, Otis continued. Not because his idea wasn't sound, but because he lacked collateral. When he mentioned giving up, I offered him my savings, $30,000 I'd been putting aside, hoping to start my own business someday. $30,000 isn't exactly a controlling stake in a multi-million-dollar corporation, Logan interjected dismissively. It was in 1988, Martha countered quietly. Thomas was operating on a shoestring budget. $30,000 would have been a lifeline. Thomas insisted on making me a true partner, Otis said. He said anyone who believed in him enough to risk everything deserved an equal stake in the outcome. But that still doesn't explain why you've been working as a janitor all these years, Richard Evans, head of sales, said skeptically. If you owned half the company, why weren't you in the executive suite? A sad smile crossed Otis's face. America in 1988 wasn't ready for a technology company co-founded by a black man. We both knew that. Investors would shy away, partners would hesitate, doors would close. So we agreed that Thomas would be the public face of Sterling Corp, while I would remain in the background. As the janitor? Ryan scoffed. That's quite a background position. I needed a job at the company, a way to stay connected, to watch over my investment. Thomas suggested maintenance, because it would allow me access to every part of the building without drawing attention. Otis's eyes swept the room. You'd be surprised what people say when they think no one important is listening. Several executives looked uncomfortable, recalling things they'd said in Otis's presence over the years. When Thomas died, Otis continued, I considered stepping forward. But you were his son, and I wanted to give you the chance to continue his legacy. I kept hoping you would grow into the kind of leader he believed you could be. The disappointment in his voice was palpable. Instead, I've watched you systematically dismantle everything your father built. The culture of innovation, the respect for every employee, the commitment to integrity. Ryan slammed his hand on the table. This is absurd. You're trying to tell us my father secretly gave control of his company to the black janitor, and you both decided to keep it hidden for decades? Do you realize how insane that sounds? Watch your tone, Ryan, Martha warned softly. My tone? Ryan laughed incredulously. We're in the middle of a major restructuring, and this person walks in with some ancient paperwork and a far-fetched story, and you're concerned about my tone? Walter Price, the CFO, had been examining the financial documents with growing concern. These appear legitimate, he admitted reluctantly. The signatures match our records, and the trust arrangement explains why these holdings never appeared in our standard reports. Even if these documents were valid at some point, Ryan argued, surely they've been superseded by one of our many corporate reorganizations over the years. Otis shook his head. Each time the company restructured, the trust's holdings were preserved. Your own financial department processed the paperwork, though I doubt anyone questioned why a notation about original trust holdings remained present through every iteration. Walter's face paled. The OTH designation, I always assumed it, was some legacy account from the founding days. It was, Otis confirmed quietly. Mine. The boardroom erupted in overlapping conversations. Through it all, Ryan's face grew increasingly flushed with anger and humiliation. Enough, Ryan finally shouted. Even if these documents are somehow legitimate, you can't just walk in here and start giving orders. There are procedures, protocols. That's correct, Otis acknowledged. As majority shareholder, I can't directly manage day-to-day operations without board approval. But I can call for votes on major company decisions. He paused. So let's start with a simple one. I moved to cancel the planned layoffs and asset liquidation discussed yesterday. Seconded, Martha said immediately. Ryan stared at her in disbelief. Martha, you can't be serious. Only someone deeply connected to this company would wait decades to step forward, Martha replied. Only someone with profound respect for Thomas's legacy would give his son so many chances. She turned to Otis. But why now? After all these years, why today? Because yesterday, I heard you discussing the termination of 400 employees, people with families, mortgages, dreams, people who have given years to this company. And I heard how casually that decision was made, as if their livelihoods were just numbers on a spreadsheet. His voice remained measured, but there was steel beneath. That's not the company Thomas and I built. Before Ryan could respond, the door opened, and a security guard entered. Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Sterling. You pressed the security button? Ryan pointed at Otis. Yes, this man has interrupted our meeting with fraudulent claims. Remove him immediately. The guard, a young man named David, looked uncertainly between them. Sir, is that Mr. Carter? It's me, David, Otis confirmed with a nod. He's trespassing in a closed meeting, Ryan insisted. I'm not sure I can forcibly remove Mr. Carter without cause, David said uncomfortably. He doesn't appear to be causing a disturbance. The disturbance is his presence at a meeting he was not invited to. Actually, Martha interrupted, if Mr. Carter is the majority shareholder, he has every right to be here. There's also the matter of these, Otis said, placing a final folder on the table. Financial records showing systematic misappropriation of company funds, offshore accounts, inflated executive bonuses never approved by the board, pension funds diverted to personal holdings. He paused. All bearing your signature, Mr. Sterling. The color drained from Ryan's face. Those are authorized transactions. Not all of them, Walter admitted. I raised concerns about their legality. Jake Wilson entered with additional financial reports, faltering as he took in the scene. Otis, standing confidently, documents spread across the table and Ryan looking cornered. Mr. Wilson, Otis acknowledged. I believe you've noticed some financial irregularities recently. Jake looked at Logan, who glared at him, then at Ryan, whose expression promised retribution. Finally, he looked at Otis, the man who had endured countless indignities with quiet dignity. Yes, sir, Jake replied. I've documented several suspicious transactions over the past year, including transfers to unnamed accounts that Mr. Sterling. Authorized! Ryan lunged to his feet. You're fired, Wilson. Clear out your desk immediately. I'm afraid you don't have that authority anymore, Otis said. Given the evidence of financial impropriety, I move that Ryan Sterling be suspended as CEO, effective immediately, pending a full audit and investigation. Around the table, hands began to rise in support. Even Walter Price, after a moment's hesitation, raised his hand. Only Logan remained loyal to Ryan. This is insanity. You're all making a colossal mistake. Ryan stood frozen, watching his power evaporate. You can't do this, he whispered. You're just a janitor. Otis met his gaze, evenly. I was never just a janitor, Mr. Sterling. I was always an owner who chose to clean. By the following morning, the news that Otis Carter, Sterling Corp's longtime janitor, was actually the company's majority owner, had spread through every department. Employees gathered in break rooms and near coffee machines, debating whether the incredible story could possibly be true. Otis arrived at his usual early hour, but this time, he didn't push a cleaning cart. Dressed in another modest but neat suit, he made his way through the lobby as conversation stuttered to a halt, and eyes followed his progress. In the executive suite, Martha Donovan had arrived early to help Otis navigate his new role. We've called an all-staff meeting for 10 a.m., she informed Otis as he entered what had been Ryan's office. People are confused and anxious. They need to hear directly from you. Otis nodded, looking around the opulent office with its panoramic views. This seems excessive, he commented. Martha smiled. It was designed to intimidate. Ryan believed the CEO's office should make visitors feel small. That's not my style, Otis replied, but it will do for now. We have more important matters to address. The door burst open, and Ryan Sterling stormed in, followed by Logan Matthews and two men in expensive suits. Making yourself comfortable, I see, Ryan said with disdain. Mr. Sterling, Otis acknowledged calmly. I didn't expect to see you here today. Did you think I'd just disappear? That I'd abandon the company my father built? Your father and I built, Otis corrected gently. And no, I didn't expect you to disappear. Just to respect the board's decision, Ryan gestured to the men behind him. Allow me to introduce Charles Bartlett and James Wilson from Bartlett and Wilson Legal. They filed an emergency injunction this morning contesting your ownership claim. We have serious concerns about the legitimacy of documents that have suddenly appeared after 3 decades, the older lawyer said. The court has granted a temporary stay pending investigation. Martha reached for her phone. I'm calling our corporate counsel. No need, the second lawyer interjected. We've already spoken with them. Otis accepted their business card. I understand you're doing your job, gentlemen, but my ownership is properly documented and has been legally maintained since the company's founding. A janitor as majority shareholder? Ryan scoffed. The courts will see through this farce in minutes. My occupation has no bearing on my legal rights, Otis replied evenly. Though if you'd like to make this about my work as a janitor, I'm comfortable with that discussion. I've spent decades watching this company from ground level, understanding its operations in ways you never bothered to. Ryan's face darkened. You've disrupted a publicly traded company and created market instability based on questionable evidence. There will be consequences. Martha stepped forward. Ryan, this isn't productive. The board has voted, and pending any court ruling, Mr. Carter is in charge. Logan spoke up. You realize this uncertainty will tank our stock price? Is that what you want for the company you claim to care about? The uncertainty began when Ryan started gutting this company for personal gain, Otis countered. I intend to end that uncertainty by restoring Sterling Corp to solid ethical footing. The intercom buzzed with a message about corporate counsel calling and auditors arriving. Ryan watched with disbelief as Otis handled these matters with unexpected poise. This isn't over, Carter, Ryan hissed. My father would be ashamed to see his company in the hands of a— Choose your next words carefully, Martha interrupted sharply. Ryan bit back whatever he'd been about to say. In the hands of someone so clearly unqualified, he finished. Let the janitor play businessman until the court set things right. As they turned to leave, Otis called after them. Mr. Sterling, I'd like your security badge and company devices before you go. Standard protocol for suspended executives. Ryan gave him a venomous look but complied, slamming his badge and phone onto the desk before stalking out. When they were gone, Martha exhaled slowly. That was just the opening salvo. Ryan won't give up easily. I never expected he would, Otis replied. But neither will I. The morning proceeded with Otis meeting the auditors, who were professional, but clearly surprised to be dealing with someone who didn't fit their preconception of a corporate owner. He assured them they would have complete access to all financial records, with Walter Price's full cooperation. As the time approached for the all-staff meeting, Otis felt a flutter of nervousness. Public speaking had never been his strong suit, and now he needed to address hundreds of employees, many of whom had never noticed him during his years of service. The company auditorium was filled to capacity when Otis walked onto the stage. The buzz of conversation died as employees registered the familiar face in unfamiliar attire. Some looked confused, others curious, and the maintenance staff wore expressions of stunned pride. Good morning, Otis began. For those who don't know me, and I suspect that's most of you, my name is Otis Carter. Until yesterday, I was part of the janitorial staff here at Sterling Corp. Today, I stand before you as the majority shareholder and acting CEO. A ripple of whispers spread through the audience. Over the next 15 minutes, Otis shared his history with Sterling Corp, the initial investment, the partnership with Thomas, and the decision to remain in the background. He explained why he had finally decided to step forward and outlined his immediate priorities: canceling the layoffs, conducting a financial audit, and reconnecting the company with its original mission. I know many of you are wondering what this means for your future here, he said. Let me be clear. Good employees have nothing to fear. Unlike the previous administration, I value the contributions of every person in this company, from the newest intern to the most senior vice president. As Otis continued, the mood in the room shifted. Initial skepticism gave way to cautious optimism. The maintenance staff looked particularly moved, some wiping away tears, others nodding vigorously. I've spent decades cleaning this building, watching and listening. I've emptied your trash cans and mopped your floors. I've overheard your frustrations and your ideas. So many brilliant ideas that were ignored because they came from the wrong level of the hierarchy. He paused, making eye contact with as many people as he could. Those days are over. Sterling Corp will now be a place where merit matters more than title, where innovation is nurtured, and where every employee is treated with dignity. As he concluded, the auditorium erupted in applause. Not everyone was clapping. Logan and his allies stood stone-faced, but the majority seemed cautiously hopeful about this unexpected turn of events. After the meeting, Otis found himself surrounded by employees eager to introduce themselves or simply shake his hand. It was strange being seen after so many years of invisibility. Jake Wilson worked his way through the crowd. "Mr. Carter, that was incredible. No one would ever guess you haven't been running board meetings for years." "Thank you, Jake. And thank you for your courage yesterday." "It wasn't easy," Jake admitted, "but seeing you stand up to Ryan gave me the push I needed." He lowered his voice. "You should know. Ryan's trying to rally support among key clients and investors. Logan's been making calls all morning." Before Otis could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. Ryan Sterling had returned, accompanied by several important-looking individuals. "Major investors," Jake explained. "Ryan must be trying to pressure the board through shareholder concerns." Martha appeared at Otis's side. "Ryan's brought Theodore Hamilton and the Westridge Investment Group. They control about 15% of outstanding shares and are demanding an emergency meeting." Otis took a deep breath. "Then let's not keep them waiting." As he moved toward the confrontation, employees parted to watch. The power struggle was now playing out in public, with the company's future hanging in the balance. "There he is, the janitor who thinks he can run a multi-million-dollar corporation," Ryan announced loudly. "Mr. Hamilton, I believe you had questions about his qualifications?" Theodore Hamilton, silver-haired and cold-eyed, assessed Otis with undisguised skepticism. "Mr. Carter, what makes you think you're qualified to lead this company? Do you have any business experience whatsoever?" The question was designed to embarrass, but Otis had spent decades being underestimated. He'd earned advanced degrees through night school and had studied the company's operations from every angle. "Mr. Hamilton, I understand your concerns," Otis replied calmly. "So let me ask you this. Under Ryan Sterling's leadership, how has your investment performed over the past 5 years?" Hamilton blinked. "Below expectations," he admitted reluctantly. "And are you aware that during that same period, executive compensation increased by 47%, while average employee salaries rose only 2%? Or that the R&D budget was cut by 30%? Otis continued with firm confidence. "I may have been a janitor, Mr. Hamilton, but I've had a front-row seat to every decision that has shaped this company. I know its strengths, weaknesses, and untapped potential better than anyone. And unlike some, my interest isn't in short-term gains that hollow out the company's future." "Pretty words," Ryan interjected. "But business isn't about sentiment. It's about results. Our stock is already down 7% this morning. How low does it need to go before you realize this experiment is a failure?" Otis didn't flinch. "The market reacts to news, Mr. Sterling, but it ultimately rewards value, integrity, and sustainable growth, all qualities that have been in short supply under your leadership." He addressed the wider audience. "The stock price will fluctuate in the short term. That's expected. But I'm not focused on tomorrow's stock ticker. I'm focused on where Sterling Corp will be in 5 years, in 10 years. He turned back to the investors. "I invite you to join me in the boardroom. I'll share my vision for Sterling Corp's future and answer your questions. Once you understand the full picture, including the financial irregularities the audit will uncover, you'll agree that this transition is not just necessary, but long overdue." As Otis led the investors away, He caught Ryan's expression. Fury mixed with, for the first time, genuine fear. The narrative Ryan had counted on, that Otis would immediately flounder, wasn't playing out as expected. The battle for Sterling Corp was far from over. Ryan still had resources and allies. But as Otis walked through the building that he had, cleaned for decades and now led, employees nodding respectfully as he passed, he felt a quiet confidence growing. This was his company, had always been his company, and he would fight with everything he had to preserve its integrity and secure its future. The power struggle had only just begun, but the balance was already shifting. 3 days after Otis's confrontation with the investors, Sterling Corp was embroiled in full-blown corporate war. The initial shock had given way to clearly drawn battle lines dividing the company. Otis sat at the head of the conference table, reviewing preliminary findings from the auditors. Martha Donovan and Jake Wilson wore equally grim expressions as they digested the information. "The irregularities are worse than we thought," Martha said, tapping a particularly damning page. "Systematic misappropriation, falsified board approvals, offshore accounts. Ryan wasn't just enriching himself, he was stealing from the company's future." Jake nodded. The R&D cuts weren't even about boosting quarterly profits. That money was redirected to shell companies that lead back to Ryan's personal holdings. "How many people knew about this?" Otis asked. "Walter Price certainly did. His signature is on most transfers. Logan Matthews was involved in the shell companies, but most of the board seems to have been kept in the dark." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Carter, the department heads are gathered for your meeting." "We'll be right there," Otis replied, securing the audit documents in a folder. "Let's keep these findings close for now. We need more concrete evidence before going public." As they walked toward the larger conference room, Martha updated him on the latest developments. "Ryan's been busy. He's filed additional legal challenges and been meeting with major clients, telling them the company is in chaos under your leadership. Has he succeeded in turning any against us? A few are wavering, but most are taking a wait-and-see approach. The bigger problem is internal. Ryan still has strong support among executives who fear change, or who might be implicated in his schemes." They entered the conference room where 15 department heads waited, the atmosphere tense with uncertainty. Otis had called this meeting to announce his restructuring plans, and everyone knew significant changes were coming. "Good morning," Otis began. "As you know, Sterling Corp is at a crossroads. The past week has revealed serious issues with how this company has been managed, but it has also shown me the incredible potential that exists when we embrace transparency and merit." He outlined his vision, a company that prioritized innovation, treated all employees with respect, and operated with integrity. Then, he moved to specifics. "Effective immediately, I'm implementing several changes. First, all executive bonuses are suspended pending completion of the audit. Second, the planned layoffs are officially canceled. Instead, we'll be reassigning personnel to revitalize our R&D division, which will receive a restored budget." The reactions around the table ranged from relief to visible discomfort. Patricia Wilson, the HR director who had been tasked with implementing the layoffs, raised a manicured hand. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice laden with skepticism, "while your intentions are admirable, these decisions seem financially unsound. The layoffs were deemed necessary for the company's survival." "Were they?" Otis countered. "Or were they necessary to maintain the excessive compensation packages that certain executives had become accustomed to?" He slid financial summaries across the table. "These numbers show that Sterling Corp remains fundamentally sound. Our problems stem not from having too many workers, but from systematic mismanagement at the top." Patricia's lips thinned, but she didn't argue further. Others, however, were less restrained. "This is absurd," said Richard Evans, head of operations and a known ally of Ryan. "You've been CEO for less than a week, and you're already dismantling strategies that took months to develop. Just because you technically own shares doesn't mean you understand how to run a modern corporation." A tense silence fell. Everyone watched Otis closely, curious how the former janitor would handle such direct insubordination. Otis met Evans's gaze calmly. Mr. Evans, I've spent 35 years observing this company from the ground up. I've witnessed which strategy succeeded and which failed. I've seen talented employees leave because their ideas were dismissed by executives who preferred comfort over innovation. He paused. But more importantly, I've never confused position with intelligence or title with wisdom. A lesson that might serve you well. Evans flushed with anger, but fell silent as several department heads unsuccessfully tried to hide their smiles. Now, Otis continued, I'd like each of you to prepare a detailed report on your department's current projects, personnel, and needs. Not the sanitized versions you prepared for Ryan, but honest assessments. I want to know what's working, what isn't, and what resources you actually require to succeed. As the meeting concluded, Otis asked Jake and the head of IT to stay behind. When the others had left, he turned to the IT director, Michael Morris. Mr. Morris, I need your help with something sensitive. We have reason to believe that company data may have been compromised. I need your team to secure our servers and recover any deleted files that might contain evidence of financial misconduct. Morris looked troubled. Sir, I should mention that I received unusual instructions from Mr. Matthews last week. He asked me to perform a comprehensive data purge of certain executive files citing routine maintenance. I delayed implementing it because it seemed irregular. That was probably an attempt to destroy evidence, Jake said. Can you recover anything that might have already been deleted? Most likely. We keep redundant backups, and unless they use specialized wiping software, we should be able to recover significant data. Make this your top priority, Otis instructed, and keep it confidential. As they left the conference room, Otis's assistant hurried toward them. Mr. Carter, there's a situation in the lobby. Ryan Sterling has returned with a news crew. He's making some kind of public statement. When they reached the lobby, they found Ryan surrounded by reporters and cameras, while employees gathered at a distance, watching with confused expressions. A travesty of corporate governance, Ryan was saying. An unqualified individual has temporarily seized control through questionable legal maneuvers, putting hundreds of jobs and millions in shareholder value at risk. Otis stepped forward, catching Ryan's eye. For a moment, Ryan faltered before recovering with a practiced smile. Ah, here he is now, Ryan announced. The janitor who would be king. Mr. Carter, would you care to explain to these reporters why you think cleaning floors qualifies you to run a technology company? The reporters swiveled their cameras toward Otis, who stood perfectly still, evaluating the situation. This was a trap. Ryan was trying to provoke him into saying something that would come across as bitter or unqualified. Mr. Sterling, Otis replied calmly, I'd be happy to discuss my qualifications, which include an engineering degree from Howard University and 35 years of watching this company evolve. But perhaps a more relevant question is why you feel the need to ambush your own company with negative publicity, rather than addressing the serious allegations of financial misconduct that have come to light. Ryan's confident expression wavered. Baseless accusations. The real issue here is a hostile takeover by someone with no business experience, no understanding of our industry, and no legitimacy beyond some ancient paperwork. The legitimacy of my ownership has been confirmed by corporate counsel, Otis countered. As for my capabilities, I suppose we'll let the results speak for themselves. Starting with the fact that under my leadership, those 400 employees you plan to terminate will keep their jobs. A murmur ran through the gathered employees at this public confirmation. Jobs they'll lose anyway when the company fails under amateur leadership, Ryan shot back. But perhaps that's the point. Maybe you're not as concerned with the company's success as you are with settling old scores. The only person undermining this company right now is the man bringing camera crews into our lobby to broadcast unfounded attacks on its leadership. Security personnel moved closer, making it clear that the impromptu press conference was over. Ryan's expression hardened as he realized his ambush had failed to provoke Otis into an outburst. This isn't over, Carter, he said quietly as the reporters began to pack up. You may have won this round, but you've made powerful enemies. Enemies who don't take kindly to having their corporate hierarchy upended by a man who used to clean their toilets. I've spent my life dealing with powerful people who underestimated me, Otis replied. I'm still here, and now, finally, I'm being seen. As Ryan departed, employees began to applaud, tentatively at first, then with growing enthusiasm. The public confrontation had only reinforced Otis's calm dignity in comparison to Ryan's desperate tactics, but the victory was short-lived. Later, that afternoon, as Otis was meeting with the R&D team, Jake burst into the room, his face pale. "We have a problem," he announced. "Major problem. Ryan's gone nuclear." "What's happened?" Otis asked. "He's frozen the company accounts," Jake explained. Breathlessly, used his banking connections to put a hold on our operational funds pending resolution of the ownership dispute. "We can't access the payroll accounts, the vendor payment systems, nothing," Martha added grimly. "And that's not all. Logan Matthews has been calling employees directly, offering positions at a new venture Ryan is starting, essentially trying to poach our top talent by creating panic about Sterling Corp's future." Otis absorbed this news silently. Ryan was willing to hurt hundreds of innocent employees just to regain control. "Options?" he asked simply. "We can fight the account freeze legally, but that could take weeks," Martha replied. "As for the poaching, we need to reassure employees that their jobs are secure, but with the accounts frozen, we can't guarantee they'll be paid on time," Jake finished. Otis nodded, making a decision. "Call an emergency all-hands meeting in 30 minutes. And get me Walter Price. If he wants any chance at leniency when the audit concludes, now's the time to earn it." 30 minutes later, the company auditorium was packed, the atmosphere thick with anxiety. Rumors had spread quickly about the frozen accounts, and employees were understandably concerned about their livelihoods. Otis took the stage, flanked by Martha, Jake, and, to everyone's surprise, Walter Price, who looked nervous but determined. "By now, many of you have heard that Ryan Sterling has taken the extraordinary step of freezing the company's financial accounts," Otis began without preamble. "This is a desperate and reckless action that threatens not just the company, but your families and your futures. I want to be completely transparent about where things stand." He outlined the situation candidly, explaining the legal steps being taken to unfreeze the accounts and the worst-case timeline they might be facing. "I know your primary concern is whether you'll receive your paychecks," Otis continued. The answer is yes, absolutely yes. Mr. Price has been working with our banking partners to establish emergency operational accounts, and I have personally provided collateral to ensure there will be no interruption in payroll. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. "Furthermore," Otis added, "I want to address the calls some of you may have received from Logan Matthews. He's offering what seem like lifeboats from a sinking ship. But let me be clear. Sterling Corp is not sinking. It's transforming, and those who stay, who help rebuild this company on a foundation of integrity and innovation rather than greed and exploitation, will be recognized and rewarded for their loyalty." Walter Price stepped forward, his voice uncharacteristically. "I've worked closely with Ryan Sterling for years, and I was complicit in much of what's now coming to light. I'm cooperating fully with the audit, because I've seen firsthand how far Ryan will go to maintain power and wealth. What he's doing now, freezing accounts that affect thousands of employees and their families, is just further proof of his disregard for anyone but himself." The auditorium was silent as employees processed this unexpected testimony from Ryan's longtime ally. As people filed out after the meeting, the mood had shifted from panic to cautious determination. Ryan's attempt to cripple the company had instead galvanized its workforce. But the war was just beginning. That evening, as Otis was preparing to leave, Jake appeared in his office doorway, his expression grim. Security just called. Someone broke into the server room. They bypassed several layers of security. "The evidence from the audit, backups are secure," Jake assured him. "But they copied files from the active servers. Given the timing, Ryan," Otis nodded, "or someone working for him, what would be his play here?" "Information warfare," Martha suggested, joining them. "Anything he could use to embarrass the company, undermine your leadership, or potentially blackmail individuals who've switched allegiance." Otis's phone rang. An unknown number. It was Ryan. Mr. Carter. His voice was smooth and confident. I hope today's little financial hiccup has given you something to think about. The only thing it's given me is further confirmation of your character, Otis replied evenly. Ryan chuckled. Character? Coming from a man who spent decades lying about his ownership? That's rich. But I'm calling to offer you a way out. A generous one, considering the circumstances. I'm listening. $15 million, Ryan proposed. Cash. Tax-free through an offshore arrangement. All you have to do is sign over your shares and disappear. You can retire comfortably, go anywhere you want. $15 million buys a lot of freedom for a man who spent his life cleaning up after others. The offer hung in the air. For a moment, Otis said nothing, letting Ryan wonder. Mr. Sterling, he finally replied. There was a time when I had nothing but a Howard engineering degree that no one would honor, and the savings I'd scraped together. I gave every dollar to your father because I believed in his vision and his character. He offered me partnership when others wouldn't even offer me dignity. Otis's voice remained steady, but there was steel beneath it. So let me be perfectly clear. There is no amount of money you could offer that would make me betray Thomas Sterling's legacy or abandon the people who work for this company. Not 15 million. Not 15 billion. You'll regret this, Ryan hissed, his composure cracking. You have no idea what's coming. On the contrary, Otis replied calmly. I know exactly what's coming. Justice. The following morning, Otis arrived to find the lobby filled with protesters, not against him, but supporting him. Employees had organized a solidarity gathering, many holding handmade signs with messages like, Stand with Otis and Ethics over Greed. People reached out to shake his hand or offer words of encouragement, a stark contrast to just a week ago, when most had barely noticed him. This is just the beginning, Jake explained as they rode the elevator. It's gone viral overnight. Janitor CEO is trending, and people are sharing their own stories of workplace discrimination and invisible workers. I never wanted this to become about me personally, Otis said. It's bigger than just you now, Jake replied. You've become a symbol. People are inspired by your story. The qualified engineer forced to work as a janitor due to discrimination, silently owning the company for decades before finally claiming your rightful place. On the executive floor, Martha was waiting, phone pressed to her ear. She ended her call as they approached. The bank freeze is working its way through the courts, she reported. More pressing is that Ryan scheduled a press conference for noon. Our sources say he's planning to release documents from the server breach. Let's prepare for the worst, Otis said. What's the most damaging information he could have obtained? There's something else you should know, Jake added. I've been working with Michael Morris all night, and we found something unexpected. In the server logs. He held up a flash drive. Whoever broke in didn't just take data, they left something behind, a hidden program designed to corrupt our databases on command, a kill switch that would have destroyed critical company data. Could have? Martha questioned. Jake smiled. Michael isolated and neutralized it before it could be activated. But more importantly, he traced it back to its source. The program was created on Logan Matthews's laptop and installed using his credentials. That's corporate sabotage, Martha breathed. A criminal offense. And we have the evidence, Jake confirmed. I think it's time we played offense rather than defense, Otis said. Get everything to our legal team immediately. Martha, contact the authorities. This goes beyond corporate politics now. Within hours, the company was buzzing with new developments. Word had leaked that federal agents were coming to investigate allegations of corporate espionage and financial crimes. Ryan's noon press conference had been mysteriously delayed, then postponed indefinitely. Shortly after 2 p.m., Otis was meeting with department heads when his assistant interrupted with an urgent message. Sir, there are federal agents in the lobby. They're asking to speak with you, and they've just arrested Logan Matthews as he tried to leave the building. In the lobby, a small crowd had gathered to watch as Logan was escorted to a waiting vehicle, hands cuffed behind his back. 2 agents approached as Otis arrived. Mr. Carter? I'm Special Agent Simmons, FBI Cybercrime Division. We'd like to ask you some questions about the evidence submitted regarding unauthorized access to your company's servers. Of course, Otis agreed. Let's talk in my office. As they headed toward the elevators, Jake hurried over, holding up his tablet. Mr. Carter, you need to see this. The headline read, Breaking. Ryan Sterling, former CEO of Sterling Corp., arrested on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. The accompanying image showed Ryan being led from his penthouse by federal agents, his expression a mask of disbelief and fury. That was fast, Martha remarked. Agent Simmons nodded. We've actually been investigating Mr. Sterling for several months based on whistleblower reports about financial improprieties. Your evidence regarding the server breach was the final piece we needed. Jake looked confused. Whistleblower reports? From whom? Agent Simmons glanced at Otis. That information is confidential, but the investigation was well underway before Mr. Carter assumed control of the company. The significance of those words wasn't lost on Martha or Jake, who both turned to look at Otis with new understanding. His decision to step forward hadn't been as sudden as it appeared. He'd been laying groundwork, gathering evidence, preparing for this moment. Later that afternoon, after finishing with the federal agents, Otis found a moment of solitude in his office. The day's events had moved at a dizzying pace, with Ryan's arrest dominating news cycles and sending shockwaves through the business community. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Jake. You were the whistleblower, weren't you? Jake asked without preamble. You've been documenting Ryan's misconduct for years. Otis neither confirmed nor denied it, but his slight smile was answer enough. All those years as a janitor, Jake continued, you weren't just cleaning. You were watching, listening, gathering evidence. The invisible man that everyone underestimated because of your race and your job. When you're invisible, Otis replied, quietly, you see things others don't want seen. You hear things not meant to be heard. It's a powerful position, if used properly. Before Jake could respond, Otis's assistant announced that the board members had assembled for an emergency meeting. In the boardroom, the remaining board members waited anxiously. Several seats were conspicuously empty, those belonging to Ryan's closest allies, who had either resigned or been implicated in the growing scandal. Thank you all for coming on such short notice, Otis began. As you're aware, today's events have fundamentally changed our situation. Ryan Sterling and several of his associates now face serious criminal charges. The company's reputation has taken a hit, but we have an opportunity to emerge stronger by demonstrating complete transparency and accountability. He outlined his immediate priorities: cooperating fully with authorities, implementing stronger financial controls, and beginning the process of making whole those who had been harmed by Ryan's actions, from shareholders to employees whose pension funds had been compromised. Most importantly, Otis concluded, we need to restore trust in our products, in our company, and in our leadership. It won't happen overnight, but if we commit to doing business with integrity, Sterling Corp can become the company Thomas, Sterling and I always envisioned. As the meeting concluded and board members filed out, Martha remained behind, a thoughtful expression on her face. You know, she said, when you first walked into that board meeting a week ago, I thought Ryan was right, that this was some kind of mistake or scam. I couldn't imagine how the janitor I'd barely noticed could possibly be the legitimate owner of the company. Otis smiled slightly. Most people couldn't, that was the point. But now, Martha continued, I can't imagine anyone better suited to lead Sterling Corp forward. You've seen this company from every angle, known its strengths and weaknesses in ways the rest of us never could. She offered her hand. I'm proud to work with you, Mr. Carter. Otis shook her hand firmly. Thank you, Martha, and call me Otis. After all we've been through this week, I think we're beyond formalities. As evening fell, Otis found himself alone in the office that had once belonged to Ryan Sterling, and before him, Thomas Sterling. On the wall hung the photograph of Thomas and Ryan at the company's ribbon-cutting ceremony, the one that had deliberately excluded Otis from the frame. Carefully, he removed it and placed it in a drawer. In its place, he hung the complete photograph that showed all three of them, Thomas in the center, flanked by Ryan and Otis, the true founding team of Sterling Corp. It was a small act of restoration, but a symbolic one. The truth, long hidden, was finally on display for all to see. 2 months after Ryan Sterling's arrest, Sterling Corporation was still healing from the wounds of the corporate war. The initial excitement had faded, replaced by the sobering reality of rebuilding a company whose reputation and finances had been severely damaged by years of mismanagement. Otis sat in what was now simply called the CEO's office. He had removed much of Ryan's ostentatious decor, replacing it with a more practical, accessible arrangement. The wall of intimidating awards had been relocated to a company museum in the lobby, and the furniture had been swapped for pieces that encouraged conversation rather than emphasized hierarchy. There was a gentle knock at the door, and Martha entered, followed by Jake and several other executives who formed Otis's core leadership team. "The quarterly numbers are in," Martha announced, her expression carefully neutral as she distributed folders to everyone present. "It's a mixed picture." Otis opened his folder and studied the figures. Revenue was down 12% compared to the previous year, and the stock price had yet to recover from its initial plunge. However, employee retention had improved dramatically, and early indicators showed a significant uptick in productivity. "The market is still punishing us for the instability," remarked David Williams, the new CFO who had replaced Walter Price. "But the fundamentals are stronger than they appear. We've eliminated wasteful spending, redirected resources to R&D, and our employee satisfaction scores are the highest they've been in a decade." Otis nodded thoughtfully. "We always knew this would be a long road. Ryan didn't destroy this company overnight, and we won't rebuild it overnight either." He turned to Jake. "How's the new talent acquisition program coming along?" Jake, who had been promoted to Director of Strategy and Innovation, grinned with enthusiasm. "Better than expected. We've actually had an influx of applications from top-tier talent who specifically mention wanting to work for the company with the Janitor CEO. Your story has become a powerful recruitment tool, and we've rehired 12 of the employees who were wrongfully terminated under Ryan's leadership," added Patricia Wilson. The HR director had initially been skeptical of Otis, but after seeing his leadership style firsthand, she had become one of his strongest supporters. Their experience and institutional knowledge have been invaluable during this transition. Otis leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk. "What about the pension restitution program?" "Moving forward according to plan," David confirmed. "We've identified all employees whose retirement funds were impacted by Ryan's schemes, and the first round of repayments will go out next week. It's stretching our cash reserves, but it's the right thing to do." "It is," Otis agreed firmly. "This company was built on the hard work of its employees, all of them, from the executive suite to the maintenance staff. Making them whole is our first priority." The meeting continued with updates from each department. Engineering reported promising progress on 3 new product lines that had been sidelined under Ryan's leadership. Marketing presented a campaign focused on the company's renewed commitment to innovation and integrity. Legal provided an update on the ongoing proceedings against Ryan and his associates, most of whom had agreed to plea deals in exchange for testimony. As the meeting concluded, Otis held up a hand to keep everyone in their seats. "Before we disperse, I want to address something important. I know many of you are concerned about the continued pressure from shareholders for immediate results. Some have suggested we should consider more aggressive cost-cutting or even explore acquisition offers." He paused, making eye contact with each person around the table. "I want to be absolutely clear. Sterling Corp is not for sale, and we will not sacrifice long-term sustainability for short-term profits. The path we're on is not the easiest one, but it's the right one. I'm asking for your continued faith and patience." After the executives filed out, Martha lingered behind, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know, when Thomas Sterling ran this company, he used to say something similar in tough times. The right path isn't always the shortest one. You remind me of him more than Ryan ever did." Otis smiled slightly at the comparison. "Thomas was a visionary. I'm just trying to honor what we built together." "Well, you're doing more than that," Martha replied. "You're transforming this place, People actually want to come to work now. They feel valued, heard. She hesitated before adding, though I still think you should let the maintenance staff clean your office. It sends an odd message when the CEO is spotted emptying his own trash can. Otis chuckled. Old habits. Besides, I like to check in with my former colleagues. They still see things the rest of us miss. Later that afternoon, Otis made his way to the cafeteria, not the executive dining room, which he had converted into a general meeting space, but the main employee cafeteria. It had become his custom to eat lunch there at least twice a week, sitting with different groups each time to hear their ideas and concerns directly. Today, he joined a table of engineers from the revitalized R&D department. They were initially startled by his presence, but quickly warmed up as he asked pointed, knowledgeable questions about their current projects. I still can't believe you understand the technical specs so well, admitted Sarah Johnson, a senior engineer. Most executives I've worked with can barely follow the simplified presentations we prepare for them. I did have an engineering degree from Howard, Otis reminded her with a smile. And I've spent 35 years listening to engineers discuss their projects while I cleaned their labs. You'd be surprised how much you can learn when no one notices you're there. Well, we notice you now, sir, another engineer remarked. And it makes a difference, knowing the CEO actually understands what we're trying to accomplish. After lunch, Otis took a deliberate detour through the maintenance department, located in the building's basement. He could have summoned its supervisor to his office, but he preferred to see things firsthand, the way he always had. The maintenance staff greeted him with a mixture of respect and familiarity. To them, he wasn't just the CEO who had once been a janitor. He was Otis, their former colleague who still remembered their names and families. How's the new equipment working out, Frank? Otis asked the department supervisor, gesturing to the recently purchased floor polishers and industrial vacuums. Frank beamed with pride. Makes the job twice as efficient, Mr. Carter. And the ergonomic, designs mean fewer back injuries. The team can't thank you enough. It should have been done years ago, Otis replied. Proper tools aren't a luxury, they're a necessity. He glanced around the maintenance area, which had been renovated with improved lighting, ventilation, and actual break space. Any other needs I should know about? Just one thing, Frank said. Some of the guys were wondering about that education assistance program you mentioned last month. Is that still happening? Otis nodded firmly. The board approved it yesterday. Any employee who wants to pursue higher education or technical certification will receive company support, tuition assistance, flexible scheduling, the works. He smiled slightly. We might have more engineers hiding in the maintenance department, just waiting for their opportunity. As evening approached, Otis found himself drawn to a part of the building he had visited countless times as a janitor, but never as CEO, the original research lab where Thomas Sterling had developed the company's first breakthrough product. Now preserved as something of a historical exhibit, the small room contained the original equipment, workbenches, and even some of Thomas's handwritten notes. Otis stood in the doorway, memories washing over him. He could almost see Thomas hunched over that workbench, sleeves rolled up, explaining his latest idea with infectious enthusiasm. They had spent many late nights in this room, Otis offering suggestions while officially there to clean, Thomas incorporating them without ego or hesitation. I thought I might find you here, said a voice behind him. Otis turned to find an elderly man in a well-worn suit, James Harrison, the company's longest-serving board member and Thomas Sterling's old friend. Harrison had been in poor health, recently and rarely came to the office, but he had consistently supported Otis from the moment his ownership was revealed. Just revisiting old ghosts, Otis admitted. Harrison nodded, moving to stand beside him. Thomas would be proud, you know. Not just of what you've accomplished these past months, but of your patience all those years. I never understood why you stayed in the background for so long. It was different times, Otis replied simply. And then it became habit, I suppose. The longer I waited, the harder it seemed to step forward. Well, I'm glad you finally did. Harrison gestured around the lab. Thomas always said his greatest invention wasn't any product. It was building a company with a soul. Ryan nearly destroyed that. You're bringing it back. Before Otis could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from Jake. "Turn on the news. Channel 6. Now." Concerned, Otis excused himself and hurried to the nearest conference room with a television. When he turned it on, he understood Jake's urgency immediately. Ryan Sterling's face filled the screen as a news anchor explained that he had been released, on bail pending trial. And in a surprising development, former Sterling Corp CEO Ryan Sterling held a press conference just minutes ago, where he made this statement. The footage cut to Ryan, standing outside the courthouse, looking somewhat thinner, but no less arrogant. "The charges against me are a fabrication, part of a calculated takeover by individuals who exploited legal technicalities to seize control of my father's company. I look forward to clearing my name and returning Sterling Corporation to its rightful leadership." Otis watched impassively as Ryan continued to spin his narrative, painting himself as the victim of a conspiracy. When the segment ended, he turned to find Jake, Martha, and several other executives who had gathered behind him. "He's still dangerous," Martha warned. "Even facing charges, he has connections, resources. And he's desperate," Jake added. "The plea deals his associates have taken make his position increasingly precarious." Otis nodded, considering their concerns. "Increase security protocols as a precaution, but otherwise we continue as planned. Ryan's fighting for his freedom now. The company is secondary." Later that night, after most employees had gone home, Otis remained in his office, reviewing plans for a new employee ownership program. The concept was ambitious, allowing every Sterling Corp employee, regardless of position, to earn company shares through a combination of tenure and performance metrics. Notification on his computer screen alerted him to an email with a subject line that made him pause. From Thomas Sterling's archives. The message was from Harrison, sent after their meeting earlier. It contained a single attachment, a scanned letter in Thomas's handwriting, dated just weeks before his death 15 years ago. Otis opened it with a sense of trepidation. "My dear friend Otis," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm no longer there to say these things in person. I've asked James to hold this letter until the day you finally claim your rightful place at Sterling Corp. A day I've encouraged you to embrace for years. I understand why you've chosen to remain in the background. The world wasn't ready when we started, and perhaps it still isn't. But Sterling Corp was always meant to be more than just another company. It was meant to be proof that innovation and integrity could coexist, that a business could prioritize people over profits and still succeed. I've watched Ryan with growing concern. He has my name but not my vision. He sees the company as a vehicle for personal wealth and power, not as the force for positive change we intended. I fear what will become of our legacy in his hands. This is why I never changed our original ownership arrangement, despite pressure from various quarters. I always believed that someday, when the moment was right, you would step forward and set things straight. The company needs your wisdom, Otis. It needs your humanity, your perspective, your unwavering moral compass. You've seen Sterling Corp from every angle, from the ground up, literally, and that gives you insights no business school could ever teach. So when that day comes, know that you have not just my blessing, but my profound gratitude. Our company will finally have the leader it deserves. Your friend always, Thomas." Otis sat back in his chair, the letter blurring slightly as his eyes misted over. After all these years, to receive this posthumous endorsement from his old friend struck him deeply. It wasn't validation he had sought, but it reaffirmed that the difficult path he had chosen was indeed the right one. With renewed determination, he returned to the employee ownership plan. There was still so much to rebuild, so much to transform. But for the first time since taking control, Otis felt certain that Sterling Corp would not just survive. It would become the company he and Thomas had always envisioned. 1 year to the day after Otis Carter had walked into the boardroom and changed Sterling Corporation forever, employees gathered in the company's newly renovated central atrium. What had once been a sterile, imposing space designed to impress, visitors had been transformed into a warm, collaborative environment where people actually wanted to spend time. A stage had been set up at one end, with rows of chairs facing it and standing room around the perimeter. The atmosphere was festive, with conversations and laughter filling the air as people found their seats. On a large screen behind the stage, a slideshow displayed images from the company's history, including several newly discovered photographs of Thomas Sterling and Otis working together in the early days. At precisely noon, Martha Donovan stepped onto the stage and approached the microphone. The crowd quieted immediately. "Good afternoon, Sterling family," she began, using the term that had become common over the past year. "Thank you all for joining us for this special occasion. 1 year ago today, our company began a remarkable transformation. A transformation from a corporation focused on shareholder value above all else, to a community built on innovation, integrity, and the simple notion that every person's contribution matters." She gestured to the side of the stage. "Please welcome our CEO and majority owner, Otis Carter." The applause was thunderous as Otis walked onto the stage. He looked markedly different from the janitor who had slipped silently through the building for decades. Dressed in a well-fitted suit, standing tall and confident, he had the bearing of a man comfortable in his authority. Yet those who knew him best could see that his fundamental humility remained unchanged. "Thank you, Martha, and thank you all," Otis began when the applause finally subsided. 1 year ago, I walked into a boardroom where I'd previously only emptied trash cans, and I claimed my place as the owner of this company. To say it caused a stir would be an understatement. Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. Many doubted whether a janitor, particularly an old black janitor who had never held an executive position, could successfully lead a company of this size and complexity. Some predicted we would fail within months. Others were certain that I would sell to the highest bidder at the first opportunity. Otis paused, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I'm pleased to report that those predictions were somewhat premature." He gestured to Jake Wilson, who stepped forward with a laser pointer and directed attention to the screen, now displaying Sterling Corp's financial data. "After an admittedly difficult first quarter, we've not only stabilized but begun to grow again," Otis continued. "Our stock price has recovered to pre-crisis levels. Revenue is up 8% over the past 6 months. Employee retention is at a 10-year high. And perhaps most significantly, our innovation pipeline is fuller than it's been since Thomas Sterling was at the helm." The screen shifted to show images of the company's latest products and initiatives. "But numbers and products tell only part of the story," Otis said, his voice growing more passionate. "What matters more is what we've become. A company where the maintenance staff receives the same respect as the executive team, where ideas are valued regardless of who proposes them, where we understand that our greatest asset isn't our intellectual property or our market position, it's our people." He moved away from the podium, preferring to speak directly to the audience without barriers. "When I was a janitor, I saw things that executives missed. I saw brilliant ideas discarded because they came from the wrong department. I saw talented people leave because they didn't fit a certain mold. I saw decisions made based on quarterly targets rather than long-term vision." Otis gestured around the atrium. "Look at us now. We're not perfect. Far from it. We still have challenges to overcome and wounds to heal, but we're building something meaningful together, something that honors the original vision that Thomas Sterling and I had all those years ago." The crowd broke into spontaneous applause, many rising to their feet. When they quieted again, Otis continued. "Today, I'm pleased to announce several new initiatives that will shape our future." He outlined the employee ownership program, which would gradually transfer a significant portion of the company's shares to its workforce. He announced the establishment of the Sterling Carter Foundation, which would provide scholarships and opportunities for minority students in STEM fields. And he revealed plans for a new campus that would include affordable housing for employees and community resources for the surrounding neighborhood. "But the announcement I'm most excited about," Otis said, his eyes twinkling, "directly concerns our cleaning and maintenance staff." He motioned to Frank, the maintenance supervisor, who joined him on stage. "Effective immediately, every member of our maintenance department will receive a 20% raise, bringing their compensation in line with industry-leading standards. Additionally, they'll be among the first to benefit from our education assistance program, with guaranteed flexible scheduling to accommodate their studies." Frank, visibly moved, shook Otis's hand as the crowd cheered. Because, Otis continued once the applause died down, you never know which janitor might be the next great leader just waiting for their opportunity. As the formal program concluded, and employees mingled at the reception that followed, Otis found a quiet moment to slip away to his office. He needed a few minutes alone to process the emotions of the day. The past year had been the most challenging and rewarding of his life. Ryan Sterling's trial had concluded 3 months earlier, with a guilty verdict on multiple counts of financial fraud and corporate malfeasance. He was currently serving a 7-year sentence, his empire and reputation in ruins. Several of his closest associates had received lighter sentences in exchange for their testimony, while others had avoided jail time through extensive cooperation and restitution. Otis took no pleasure in their downfall, only in the justice it represented for the employees and shareholders who had been harmed by their actions. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Jake, accompanied by a young woman Otis recognized as a recent hire in the maintenance department. "Sorry to disturb you, sir," Jake said, "but Rebecca here has something she wanted to share with you privately." Rebecca stepped forward nervously, clutching a folder. "Mr. Carter, I just wanted to thank you personally. I started working here 4 months ago on the night cleaning crew. Last week, I applied for the Education Assistance Program to finish my computer science degree." She opened the folder to reveal an acceptance letter. "They approved it yesterday. I'll be able to complete my degree while keeping my job. I never thought that would be possible." Otis smiled warmly. "That's exactly what the program is designed for, Rebecca. I'm thrilled for you." "There's more," she said, her voice gaining confidence. "I mentioned my interest in software development to my supervisor, and instead of dismissing it, he connected me with the head of engineering. I'm going to be shadowing the dev team 1 day a week while I'm in school, learning on the job." The pride in her voice struck a chord with Otis. He remembered his own youthful ambitions, how they had been thwarted by the prejudices of his time, and how different Rebecca's experience at Sterling Corp was becoming. "That's the company we're building," Otis said simply. "Where talent rises, regardless of where it starts." After Rebecca left, glowing with encouragement, Jake lingered behind. "You know, I've been meaning to ask you something. Now that the company's stable again, now that you've proven yourself beyond any doubt, have you ever thought about retiring? Enjoying the fruits of your labor?" Otis chuckled. "Retire? I spent 35 years waiting to do this job properly. I'm just getting started." Later that evening, after most employees had gone home, Otis took a solitary walk through the building, a habit he had maintained from his janitorial days. In the main lobby, he paused before a new installation, a glass display case containing his old janitor's uniform, carefully preserved and respectfully presented. Beside it, a simple plaque read, "Never judge a person's potential by their position. The most powerful voices often belong to those we fail to hear." Otis studied the uniform, the worn fabric, the faded name tag, the subtle patches and repairs that spoke of years of dignity in work others considered beneath them. Then he looked up at the modern, thriving company around him, forever transformed by the humble janitor who had finally claimed his rightful place. It wasn't about cleaning floors, he reflected. It had always been about cleaning up what was broken, in the company, in the system, in people's perceptions. And in that sense, perhaps he had never stopped being a janitor after all. With quiet satisfaction, Otis turned and headed toward the exit. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to build on the foundation they had established. The journey wasn't over. It was, in many ways, just beginning. As he stepped outside into the evening air, Otis looked back at the Sterling Corp logo illuminated against the darkening sky. Beneath it, recently added in slightly smaller letters, were the words that completed the company's new identity. Founded by Thomas Sterling and Otis Carter, 1988. After decades in the shadows, Otis Carter's name finally stood in the light, not just as the company's savior, but as its creator. The circle was complete. Justice, long delayed, had finally been served. Ever wonder how many people we dismiss without knowing their true power? Otis Carter's transformation from invisible janitor to company owner isn't just a story. It's a reminder to look deeper at the invisible people in our own lives. If this tale of justice long overdue moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share. Your thoughts below. More stories of unexpected triumph coming soon.